Good afternoon. I'm with Genaro Costilla, General Manager of Magna International, to do a small interview about this company.
Yes, my name is Gerardo Costilla. I'm the general manager of Magna Systems Monterrey. I've been working at that company for the past 27 years. Magna as a whole enterprise is the first supplier of automotive parts for the whole world. It's always fighting between the first, second, or third. Right now, I am sure it's the first for North America, but it's probably fighting with Robert Bosch and JCI, the second and third position. As a company, in 2019, Magna sold roughly $40 billion, and it probably commanded for about part of $3 billion and some more tinge of profit. So it is a sizable, very interesting company to work for. But I'm going to answer the questions that I answered to you for your homework will be on my personal opinion, personal title, not as a manager and not Magna's opinion. Okay? Go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. That is, what is the best way to maintain the business with clients for long-time retention in international negotiation management? Avoiding the conflict is the key?
Of course not. That is crazy. Conflict is a necessary event of doing business. What is important, I think the best way to really retain your customers, particularly in the industry that I work for, but I would apply it to almost any industry, would be to provide always what they need, what they want, and the amount that they need, and at the time that they need it. Conflict is necessary. You need to have conflict when you have business. The issue is not the conflict. The issue is how you manage the conflict. And so you have to make sure as a professional that the conflict and discussions that you handle or that you have with anyone, not only with your customers, but even with your internal customers within your company, are always the efforts and all of the animosity derived from that conflict is directed towards the resolution of the conflict. Because after all, the objective has to be that you are there to maximize the results or the key measures that you're looking for. You're not there to fight. You're there to resolve issues, problems, and to focus into the best that you can do for whatever you're working for. And I'm being very general. In Magna's case, it would probably be for their customers and for being a good so-called corporate citizen, being sustainable nowadays. That's one of the key words that we are using. But never avoid conflict. That would be the message that I have to give you that question. Just make sure the conflict is not destructive. A conflict needs to provide solution. My boss, and an old boss that I used to have, used to say, no friction, no traction. In other words, if you don't have conflict, you don't advance. Thanks.
Okay, the next question is, what are the cultural and communication barriers to international successful negotiation, and how do you overcome them, given your reasoning on the key strategies for it?
That's a very good question and a very broad question. I have found many times that probably the hardest things to overcome have to do with your own expectations. In other words, if I am Mexican, which I am, to me it'd probably be nothing in body language to not only shake your hand, but like hug you type thing. That's customary in Mexico. If you go to Europe and some countries, it's customary that you would kiss on the cheek. No matter, you can be a man, which would feel strange in Mexico. If you go to Japan, you're gonna have to be very respectful, keep a distance. So my expectations were always that people would behave at the beginning like I do, and if they did not be kind of thrown off a little bit off base. And I'm here to tell you that that's probably your worst enemy. So here's what you can do. There's training for cultural sensitization, sensitization. I can't remember how you say that in English, but you can learn the ways of the culture of the country you're going to be dealing with before you have your interview, before you have your dealing, before you have, you have a very good example with our neighbors here that have arrived from Korea, which had the ugliest and most terrible cultural shock with Mexicans and in general with Westerners. What I can tell you is you need to study a little bit. If you have to know your peers. You have to get ahead of time. If you have traveled, that's a good thing. If you have lived overseas, that's a very good teaching experience. If you have not, then look for keys on cultural sensitization or sensitization. I think that's the term. I can't remember. That's one thing, and the other big barrier that, aside from our own expectations, that I have seen is. And this has to do again with conflict resolution. People tend to take it personal, and people tend to be very aggravated when certain management or negotiation styles are too assertive. And you have to gauge those things. You have to measure those things. You have to develop a feel when you need to be really assertive or when you need to back off a little bit from the people. So, and personal interfacing with different cultures, I think expectations and regulating your assertiveness is always a good thing, and it's probably something you have to do and strategize ahead of time.
Why is it difficult to get negative feedback from counterparts in many foreign countries? Can you give an example?
Well, getting negative feedback from counterparts is difficult in your own country. You don't have to go that far. The more so if your peers are from overseas, but it's in human nature. We don't take criticism so good. If somebody comes and tells you, "Oh, you're fat," I don't like it. The fact is, I'm kind of fat. But the point, the thing is, again, and going back to, and all of your questions are around the same thing.
Yes.
Going back to conflict and going back to difficult times and international dealings, you have to do your homework. In other words, if you know it is an insult for you to sneeze in front of whomever, well, here I would think twice. I just, cough or sneeze or go like that. But maybe it's bad in another place. So you have to see what you should not do and what you can do. Same token, when somebody is giving you feedback, you kind of have to be trained for it. You kind of have to be very open and try not to be full of yourself. If you don't do those things, the criticism will convert immediately at conflict, and it will be destructive conflict. And same token, when you are going to critique someone, you have to be aware of what that person is expecting. And if it is too difficult or too tough, or they're going to take it personal, my advice is go to facts and only state facts. Because facts are not deniable. And when you state facts, people can't argue when they're receiving that criticism.
question is, describe the kinds of problems that usually come up during international business negotiations.
It's the problems that come into any negotiation really, but they are usually increased by the fact that it is at another country. If you go with the United States, you really don't have that much of a problem with cultural blending because we are all familiar. In this side of the hemisphere, we're all very familiar with each other. When you go to Asia, or when you go to Europe, Europe is kind of westernized, that's not the issue, but Asia is usually an issue. Why is it so difficult to have those negotiations? Well, first thing comes to mind is you don't know the language. You're at the freaking airport and you look up and it's in Korean or it's in Chinese or it's in you tell me, whatever it may be. So you don't understand that thing. You have to look at the little words. And if you are at the airport, but when you go out, you try to get a taxi. Nobody knows English, much less Spanish. So yes, when you are overseas and when you're in other countries, the intensity and difficulty has increased. What you can do in order to diminish or to lower those risks, you again have to prepare ahead of time. So if you're going to China, get on the phone and get somebody from your company that is in China. If you don't know anybody, try to get in touch with someone that knows someone that is trusted and is bilingual. But be prepared for that person to receive you and drive you around, take you to places, guide you through. Somebody you can trust over in that foreign country is very important. Study the language. Study how to say hi. You have no idea how to, ni hao will open some doors in China. Hi will open some doors in Japan. You have to be courteous and prepared. And that's the way you avoid some of, or minimize some of the difficulties you will have as you are trying to negotiate things. And then there's always the issue of the business itself. So you have to be prepared very thoroughly what your business proposal and what you're going to give and what you can negotiate and what you cannot negotiate. That's a given. That's in Mexico and that's anywhere. I'm talking about the things surrounding that core negotiation. Okay?
Okay, and the last question. Have you ever experienced an unsuccessful negotiation process and at the end as a company you couldn't reach an acceptable agreement? What did you learn from that as a company?
Well, yes, of course. I have had many unsuccessful negotiations. What did I learn? I learned to be better in a broad aspect, okay? But, at points in time, I learned about the fact that my competitor is better pricing or better in some sort of deal or offering than me, for example, and I have to work on those things to be more competitive. In a thing that went off the rails, off track, and somebody exploded, I learned that I have to measure my reactions in front of the customer so that they don't get angry in a destructive way. In places where I lost the business, I sometimes learned, incredibly, that I was better off with that business because in the end it was going to be very bad business. So you learn from your mistakes. The only one that doesn't make mistakes is the one that does nothing. In other words, it is better to make mistakes or to have a failure and learn from it than no failure. And then from there you gain. And then from there you learn. And then from there the next time you're going to be better and you're going to make a better negotiation. You're going to get your business. That's the point. That's the point of the whole process. If you fall, you have to learn from it and go at it again. That's the message I could give you and your peers.
Okay, so we finished with the interview. Your answers were very interesting, and thank you very much for your time.
You have no idea. I could probably go on for 2 hours.
Thank you.